So good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Legal Tech Talks. My name's Frances Anderson, and I'm the MD of Net Law Media. So today, I'm thrilled to be hosting a highly current discussion, the future normal, with Tara Waters, who's the partner and head of Ashurst Advanced Digital. Now, this is the technology arm of the firm's new law division, Ashurst Advanced. So what does she actually do? So in this role, she is responsible for designing, developing, and delivering innovative technology-based solutions for their clients. In addition, Tara maintains a legal practice focused on the technology sector and advising high-growth companies on a full range of transactional matters. Now, prior to this, she became a lawyer. Tara spent 7 years architecting and developing digital solutions for businesses in the new media and technology industries in NYC. Now, before we continue, I need to run through a little housekeeping for those who have not joined one of our sessions before. So as many know, and those of you who haven't joined before, this will last about an hour with questions being brought in through the session. So if you would like to speak with Tara or ask her a question directly to one of the points that we discussed during this session, please click on your name in the participation panel and I will bring you in live, or you can put the question through the Q&A, which is at the bottom. And again, I'll be monitoring that, and I'll be able to bring that question in and ask Tara directly and get a little bit of engagement, because your thoughts count just as much, and it would be great to have that kind of debate, as some of them will be a little controversial, which is always good in these type of sessions. And at the same time, you know, we're all going through a huge raft of change right now, I think, in the legal profession, which I think we can all agree. So firstly, Tara, I'm absolutely delighted to have you with us today. So welcome. It's your first time.
Thank you so much. Yes, glad to be here.
So let's have a look at what we're going to be talking about. So there is a lot of talk about the next normal or the future normal, which this session's entitled, and obviously return to work. As we, the legal community, step into what will be the new normal, this session, we're going to look beyond the current challenges and take a deeper look at what the future will offer and the changes that are currently upon the legal profession as a whole. So let me start. Tara, you talk a lot about the future normal. Now, what does the future normal actually mean to you?
Yes, that's actually a topic we talk a lot about within our team in Ashurst Advanced. And I think for me personally, 3 words come to mind, which is change, opportunity, and evolution. I think obviously, I don't think we can disagree. There's been a lot of change happening in a lot of different ways. And I think the pandemic has really held a magnifying glass up to some of those changes. But I think what's really important is with change brings opportunity. And I'm not necessarily a half glass full type of person, but I think we really need to embrace all of these changes or challenges, or however you want to characterize them, as opportunities, because ultimately what we need to do is push forward. We need to persevere. We need to find the ways to continue doing what we're doing and improve upon them in the future. And I think the future normal, therefore, is really about how do we evolve, taking all of this change as opportunity and using that really as jet fuel for us to kind of rocket launch ourselves into the future. And I think in particular for the legal industry, who many from the outside look in, see it as very archaic, very old, very traditional and staid. I don't think they realize actually how much is going on inside the industry, and that actually the change that's coming, we've really moved away from fear of the change and to excitement, and to recognizing that there are some incredible opportunities. We're able to do so much more than the profession allowed us to do previously. And I think ultimately what that means is we're going to see this incredible evolution of this industry, an incredible evolution of our roles and our paths within the industry. And I think hopefully, you know, the law finally will be seen from the outside as something actually that's quite an exciting place to be. And, you know, as a person who was not a traditional lawyer in terms of the path that I took to get here, to say that the law is an incredibly exciting place to be may seem really strange, but it is. And I think hopefully we're going to start to see a lot of really interesting and new and innovative things happening within this industry that other industries are actually going to start to take notice of.
Do you know, that's actually quite a nice thing to say, isn't it? Exciting to be in the legal industry. I actually agree. You know, going back 10 years, I might have had a different attitude where, you know, when you have a look at glass ceiling, how difficult it was to actually push through some of the projects or get the ear, you like to say, of the executives and the teams, and where these wonderful innovation hubs, such as what you're doing at Ashurst, you know, weren't really there. So that sort of brings me into a little bit more about you, because you were named as one of the innovative finance women in FinTech Power List, which is absolutely an amazing feat, and one which I think is a great role model for, you know, women and other individuals coming through to see these type of achievements from individuals who are now in the industry. But if I have a look at FinTech, and I have a look at obviously your role, you know, in Ashurst and what they're doing there, what does client innovation mean to you in this type of context?
Yeah, you know, we work with a lot of really interesting and up-and-coming fintech companies, but we also work with really established financial institutions and other players in that industry, and how they can interact. And I think for me, the client innovation there is as lawyers actually playing a role in that ecosystem. And it's very much an ecosystem. And you'll hear, I think there's people who work a lot with people that in really technology rich industries will hear that word a lot. And I think it's an important one, and I really like it because industries across the board have been grappling with their own changes and their own disruption. And I think what collectively really supports these various ecosystems is that community and the bringing and the pulling together and bringing together of different players to share knowledge, to share learnings, and to find new ways of doing things together. And I think that's really, really powerful. And I think from a client innovation perspective, to be able to play a role in that journey and that agenda is really where lawyers and people in this industry can add a tremendous amount of value, because we see a huge range of transactions and types of businesses. We've seen their life cycle journeys of businesses. So we have a lot actually to offer companies in other industries in terms of how they should approach new situations, how they can work with other businesses, how they can collaborate, as between a huge bank and a tiny startup, and what they need to work on together and how to protect themselves, but how to also be open and make sure that that collaboration bears a lot of fruit. And I think that's really where the role of working with clients and innovating the way we work with clients and helping them achieve their aims ultimately is where that sort of part of what we do is moving towards. And that's 100% from a fintech perspective, something that we're doing a lot of within Ashurst.
Do you find the collaboration pieces have picked up more in terms of more? It's always been quite client driven market, hasn't it, if we're frank, over the last few years. Do you think that's more so now in terms of collaboration, what you've been doing and what you're seeing?
Definitely. And we are constantly asked by our much more established clients, what are we seeing in the market? Who can we connect them to? Just to get some information, just to get a sense of what they should be, what trends they should be tracking, what's new, who's the new competitor on the block. But I think also, I think all of us as slightly larger businesses need to recognize we're not going to be able to do everything the best. And really one of the fastest tracks to actually getting ahead is collaborating with somebody who does that. That's their bread and butter. That's the one thing that they do amazingly. And rather than trying to reinvent the wheel or copy, why not just collaborate? And I think now that we have, decades now of really amazing, innovative, in particular technology-driven companies coming out whose entire ethos is all about collaboration. The first thing they think about is, how do I join a bunch of puzzle pieces together, not how do I become the one end-all be-all platform. I think now that more and more people coming up through business in different industries have that mindset, collaboration is absolutely the sort of hot topic. And I think that's going to be really fundamental to the future of all business.
Now, I mean, looking at the kind of collaboration, it's also, innovation gets banded around a lot. And I know Rachel from the head of collaborations at Ashurst is very much like, what does it mean now? But you won this award, the most innovative firm at the British Legal Technology Awards last year, in terms of the firm's collaborative approach in delivering technical expertise to clients. So what do you see as fundamental drivers for leading innovation, and also, digital transformation for new solutions?
I think there's probably two ways to look at it. I think organizationally, if you're within an organization that's trying to achieve those aims, firstly, you just need simple acceptance and recognition that that's important. Transformation is necessary, and not all organizations are fully there yet. But you need that. You need people to accept it, and you don't want to be swimming against the tide from that perspective. But then within the organization, that there needs to be that willingness to not just support the idea, to not say, "Oh, that sounds great. Go do that over there, away from me," but actually to play a part in it. And I think that particular award, it was very, the collaboration was very much multiple teams within the firm, the client matter team recognizing that they needed to work really closely hand in glove with the Asher Savants team to deliver that particular project for the client successfully. The willingness to actually be involved and not pitch an idea over the fence and expect someone to take that up and great, go innovate over there. And then I think also really, really important, of course, is a willingness at the organizational level to invest time and money into these initiatives, and recognize that this is it's a journey. It's not a project. It's a journey. It's a lifetime. It's an evolution of your business. And so you need to have patience, and you need to be willing to accept some risk and recognize that every single investment isn't going to pay off necessarily in the way that you want to, and be okay with that. So you need to develop a little bit more of an investor mindset in how you're choosing which initiatives and projects and opportunities to engage in, and be willing to pull back from something when it's not quite going your way or the way you want it to, but be willing to let something take its natural course to get to the end result, because it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. Transformation is necessarily a journey. And then I think,
sorry,
just to quickly round up, just say individually, if you're a person in an organization that's potentially looking at digital transformation within the organization, then I think individually you just need to be curious. You need to be willing to and open to, and have an appetite for learning, and be brave enough to say, maybe I don't know anything about this, but I'm willing to learn so that I can play my part.
See, that's an interesting one, appetite for learning. And I think that has traditionally, I don't know if you agree, you could absolutely not, and people who are listening could absolutely disagree with me here. I think that has been a big barrier. It's the change piece. So resistant in the sense to want to learn new skill set. As you said, the investor mindset, for example, has one which I think has been a great challenge for many professional lawyers. Very, very, very good being, good at what they do, but not necessarily so much on the business side, which I think is very much where the market is. But do you think when we look at this, having a diverse team, looking at the gender balance, looking at diversity here, do you think that is key here to having that change mindset?
It's absolutely key. And I think what's really important is what you can't do is, contract in someone to deliver transformation for an organization. You need the people inside the organization to live it and to breathe it. And diversity, we all know, we've read about it, we've read the statistics. This year has been an incredibly powerful year in talking about diversity. From the 100 years celebrations at the tail end of last year, just women being recognized as people under the law and able to practice law, to now looking at minority representation within organizations and what that means. So I think it's incredibly important because firstly, you need the people in an organization that look up to see themselves reflected in the organization in order for them to see themselves having a place there long term. And if you don't have that, you're simply going to lose all of those people over time. But I think more important than that is, of course, the diversity is not just about the statistics and the percentages, but it's actually about what they're bringing to the table when they come to work, when they come with their ideas. And what that is not the diversity of, the color of their skin or their ethnicity or their gender, but it's actually the diversity of their experience and their backgrounds, which is really important. And a lot of times the two are linked, but they're not always completely linked. It's not necessarily direct. But I think having people who have had previous, careers or jobs, or who have come from a different location or country, and have that different perspective to bring to the table is only going to allow an organization to understand what are the actual options in front of me. Because if we kept ourselves to, sort of very homogenous London centric, we think, oh, maybe there's 3 things we could do in this scenario. But when you bring to the table people coming from a very diverse range of backgrounds and experiences, you're going to have 10, 20 ideas and options brought to you at the table. And not all of them will necessarily be fit for purpose, but we're simply never going to know what we don't know. And so that's really why it's important that we have that diversity within the organizations. And I think, to the point that the diversity is not the things that we statistically always speak about, there's a systemic issue. And I think, for me, coming from big law, in London, we need to be thinking, beyond London. We need to recognize there's the whole of the UK, and there's people from different areas and different regions and different fantastic universities and schools and backgrounds and people in other countries that we need to bring into the organization. And we need to find ways to really sow roots in all of those pools of talent that exist out there, and help nurture them and bring them into this industry and bring them into the other industries where their representation has historically been very low.
See, that leads into a really interesting question from Elena. She's actually gone totally agree with you, Tara. She goes, women are not represented as well as men in technology related design and services roles. And I think that's been traditionally seen, I'd say. Maybe 18 months ago, there's been a lot of change. I think you would agree with me on this one, Tara, over that time. But how do you see this gender inequality unfolding in the future of legal tech? I think that's quite an interesting question from Elena. And thank you, Elena.
Yes, thank you. I definitely agree. And obviously, this is not a new problem from a technology perspective. But I think one of the good things that have come out of the difficult conversations we've been having over the past, 6 months, 1 year, I think has been shining a light on the investor community who are propping up these new innovative companies and asking them to evaluate what prejudgments are they bringing into the meeting room when they talk to businesses. For example, that might be female founder-led, female technology-led, and what are they doing to encourage more of those businesses, because they exist. I attend lots of different events. There's so many amazing female founders out there who are tremendously talented in technology across a range of types of roles. So it's not for a lack of those people being there, but they're not the people we see or hear about that we're hearing the big investments come into. And I think we're questioning why. And I think hopefully, again, in the same way that in the legal industry, I think, the clients sometimes have to push us to make changes. I think in the same way, we need the investor community to be pushing and championing and promoting and sponsoring more female-led new businesses, and in particular in the legal technology industry, where it's not just the customer success managers that are female, but it's the founder, it's the CTO. I love it when I come across a company that has a female CTO. I'm working with one right now, and it's actually a 3 female founder team, and it's just amazing to work with them. And I just really hope that, in particular, the investor community really continues to push towards making improvements in that area.
No, it's a really interesting question, because we work with the children on the STEM side. So, she gender bias in STEM. She kindly put a link there for people. So if you have a look, everybody, in your chat, you can see the link which Elena's sort of given. But I think STEM is one thing, education, but absolutely, that's a really interesting point in terms of the investor community and the pressure they could potentially give. It's not pressure, but suggestions. So looking at the firm and Ashurst and what you've been doing there over the past 5 years, if we look at the community as well as a whole, firms have dramatically changed their structure. Given the challenges this year has offered as well, how do you empower and cultivate people development that unleashes the best in everyone to drive transformation in a firm?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I think at the end of the day, law firms are firms of people, and we're a people business, and we're very relationship driven, not only with our clients but within our firms, as as we discuss, as collaboration within the firm becomes ever more important to the success of the firm. And so I think that, and in particular, for the time being, while most of us still remain relatively remote, I think it's incumbent, therefore, on the senior people within the firm, and they don't necessarily have to have the title of partner, just the senior people in the firm whose role it is to be looking after and cultivating the talent within the firm, need to, frankly, just be more proactive in talking to the people coming through their business and understanding their drivers, understanding their motivations, providing that real mentoring and sponsorship, helping them to understand what their career could look like and guiding them on that path, because it's a tough path now. And I think then, finding alignment in terms of what they're looking for out of their career, with what the firm has to offer, and also aligning their sense of purpose. What is it that gets them up in the morning and gets them excited and makes them engaged? And if that's not fully aligned either, trying to make sure the firm's bringing out those areas, or in all honesty, sometimes if the alignment isn't there, finding lateral ways to move them within the organization, if that's what could be best, because then staying with the organization is good if it's good, then finding the place that they can best call home, and instead of looking at these very linear paths which have traditionally existed within law firms, finding the zigzag path for that person to really feel at home.
No, thank you. Yeah, so it's I think the development piece is a massive one which firms are facing, but also I think there's a lot of other difficulties internally, isn't there, at the present time, aligning all of these different operations. But looking at the kind of importance where agility, so focusing in on agility here, what do you see as the main barriers to achieving competitive advantage in the market currently? Okay, so it's a couple of things. So what do you see there currently, but also, do you think that the legal sector responds fast enough to competitive and market disruptions?
Well, I think, to be honest, I think the biggest barrier is fear. And that comes in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different forms. I think a lot of it is, frankly, it's FOMO. You hear somebody did something, you're like, oh, we have to do it. How do we do this? Oh, we're behind. We haven't done this. And frankly, a lot of what you read in the legal press can be a bit smoke and mirrors, and people get really worked up over those sorts of things. I think, some of those barriers, for example, are under-resourcing the key initiatives that put you on the path to success. As I said, a lot of times there's a great idea, someone has a great idea, this would be fantastic, and then they lob it over the fence for somebody else to do. So you actually don't have that institutional investment in that initiative, and they're not allowing you to carry that through. And they could remove some of those barriers, I think, by doing that, by making sure you've got the right resource, the right plan, the right focus. But sometimes they just say, hey, here's this great idea, you go get on with it, see what happens, report back to us. and then people are feeling like you're not actually progressing forward. But what happened was actually the organization didn't really stand behind that initiative in the right way. But because otherwise, frankly, I think it's relatively difficult to find the differences between different law firms and within the brackets. If you're a big law firm, you're not, the competitive advantage is tough. Mostly you're looking at, well, do I have the highest ranked partner in that specialism, or do I have the newest offering in that area? And frankly, we're all just sort of following each other, and someone takes the lead at any given point. And I think that sort of leads me to an answer on the second part of the question, which is, do we respond fast enough? In my personal opinion, absolutely not, of course. We've always been a slow-moving industry, but things are improving. And I think what's important is that I think where sometimes law firms come into difficulty is when they see someone because of that FOMO, they see someone announce they're doing X, Y, or Z, or they're seeing a consulting firm start to come into an area, or a tech company come in, and they simply try to copy something or buy something without actually planning ahead. How does this really work within our organization and within the legals, within the regulated legal industry? Because without sounding precious, there are peculiarities about the way law firms work, the way they're structured, and you need to basically have the dream match with reality at some point. And what I think a lot of law firms probably fall down on is actually understanding what happens at that interface, and how do I prevent my plan from falling down because I wasn't prepared for that interface with reality. So I think, we don't want to, we're definitely not in a space where we can, quote unquote, move fast and break things in the way that the technology world does. And I use a phrase, which actually I think I stole from a client, but it's, what we need to be able to do is fail safe and fail small. We need to be able to do those small innovations and tests and trials that give us that slight bump, that keep us with the market, that don't let us fall behind, that keep us and sustain us. But we need to be willing to fail on a few of those. So that means, going back to having the investor mindset, that means we need a bit of a portfolio of things that we're trying at any given time to keep us with the market. And every once in a while, hopefully one of those things will actually push us slightly ahead.
Are you able to give us any hints of some of your kind of portfolios you're dealing with at the moment? Without giving too much away,
Well, I think actually Asterisk Advance and what we're doing is a portfolio of a lot of those ideas. And I think part of why we've had success in Asterisk Advance has been that's been brought together as a division that's supported financially by the firm, that's completely bought in by the firm. But within Asterisk Advance, we're able to trial new things. So as an example, my specific team, Asterisk Advance Digital, we're making a push into the digital products area. We actually have our first product targeted to launch next month.
Oh, and, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. It's been a lot of, during this COVID period, the team's been working double time, frankly, because we think that having some of these technology-based solutions is a great alternative for a lot of our clients who are, even more feeling the financial pressure about, engaging legal service providers and making sure they're getting the best out of it, but also still facing this continuous barrage of regulatory change. And so we're looking at how we can use technology to do that. And we've got, actually quite a pipeline of other ideas, in line behind this one that we're working on. And it's adapting our approach to how we can quickly assess whether this idea is really something in there that we think we can actually push forward and our kind of benchmark is this really moving the bar? Is this really innovative? And what we need to be able to do is do that quite rapidly. But actually, it's going to take quite a while to get any of those ideas out the gate. But we need to be able to have those quick moments in that process.
So I think everyone's going to be going interesting watching what Asterisk Advance got coming out next month. So hit the press. No, but that's brilliant. And for yourself, drawing back onto your experience, as a tech partner, as a technologist here, what have you personally experienced as the main challenge, or what have you experienced as main challenges for key digital project implementation? And has this changed, have you found, during sort of the lockdown period?
I think the main challenge is probably, lack of resource or improper resourcing of the implementation project, which either will mean that it takes 3 times as long to do because you don't have the resources and you need to give them longer for the existing resources to make the time to get it done, or it means that it gets abandoned. And we hear about that, of course, from clients who were looking at slightly larger programs of change who have scaled them back for a variety of reasons, including the COVID issue now. That's not to say that people have completely closed the purse strings, but it becomes difficult when there's expectations about change and the result from change. And if people aren't seeing immediate benefit and result, frankly, it sours them on the idea. And I know that, for example, within law firms, lawyers are relatively discerning and exacting in terms of, if you've given me a piece of technology, it better do what you told me it did. And if I don't have a good experience, actually, I'm just gonna not use it because I can go back to my old ways. In other industries, actually, they don't have the ability to go back to old ways necessarily in the same way that we do. So what then you see is people left with pieces of legacy projects that were never fully implemented, that either aren't used or are used but actually adds to the confusion and the noise of what they're trying to do, which makes the next project ever more difficult to do because you've suddenly got 5 extra legacy pieces of technology that might have been brought in for a project that got halted halfway through. Some people are using it, some people aren't. And then it makes it more difficult to try to find the new solution that somehow covers all of that. So I think probably as a result of lockdown, we're seeing people ask, well, should I be moving forward with my project or not? Or should I put it on pause for the time being while we're waiting to better understand really the impact on my business? Or they're plowing ahead, but they're doing it very slowly. And I think if it's too slow and it doesn't have the right resources behind it, you risk potentially that you're just not going to deliver, or it's going to be so far out by the time you deliver it. 3 years, and from a technology perspective, is a lifetime. By the time you deliver it, it's no longer the new thing and the transformative thing that you thought it was going to be.
So what lessons, do you think, so looking at, again, more on the Ashurst Advanced piece, what lessons have you learned, or you and your team have learned along the way so far?
I think it's, definitely that the point about the sort of organizational institutional support has been really important. And I think the evolution of Ashurst Advanced, actually, when it launched now probably almost 5.5 years ago, it was sort of more of a project. It was a separate team, and it slowly grew and evolved and added limbs and features to that offering. A little over a year ago, it became a division within the firm, alongside our four legal divisions. With a full P&L, with a budget, with the backing supported, with our division head Chris Georgiou sits on our executive team and has a voice in that. And I think that journey there in recognizing the power of that voice at that top level, and having the buy-in, therefore, at that top level has been so critical, I think, to the continued success of things, because we've really been able to take them on that journey with us and help them understand the drivers behind why Ashurst Advanced exists, why it's important for the firm, and that we aren't other. We are equal. We are 1/5 of the firm, and actually that collaboration within the firm. Everything we do. We talk about it being a 50-50 joint venture with whoever we're working with, because we ourselves, although we are starting to come up with some of our own specific offerings, ultimately, and most of the time, we're doing that through client relationships that are pre-existing with the firm that sit outside of our division. And that bit is really, really important and fundamental, I think, to the success. And having that brought together as a division has really been important.
So Elena's popped up again with another question. Thank you, Elena. It's great. It's great to get you involved. So don't be shy, people. If you've got questions, it'd be great to get your thoughts as well engaged on these kind of pieces. And with regards to, hubs like Advanced as well, Ash has Advanced. So Elena's saying, will creativity be a crucial skill for creating new business models by legal providers? Interesting one.
Yes, I mean, I was going to say, let me say something maybe people won't agree with. I think creativity is a crucial skill for a lawyer, because it's the job is not cookie cutter, and you really have to listen to your clients and understand their business, which would be different, and recognize that tech company A is different than tech company B for X, Y, and Z reasons. Bank A is different than bank B for X, Y, and Z reasons, and so you actually. You've got that base knowledge and skill set, but you need to be creative in thinking about how do I solve this problem. And I think at the end of the day, that's where this industry is going. Is we're lawyers, we're trusted advisors, we're problem solvers, and what we need is creativity to solve those problems. And so I think that's just generally. Now, in terms of introducing new business models, then of course, yes, creativity is important to the introduction of the new business models. And I think you also need to be willing to look outside, of course, and identify what are the different business models that exist, how have they been successful. But then, importantly, and this goes to what I was saying before, you have to figure out how do I adapt that business model for the legal industry and for my organization specifically within the legal industry. And that's actually where the real creativity comes in, because you can't just lift something up that sits in another industry and say, oh, let's do that here. It's a recipe for disaster, frankly. And you'll be banging your head against the wall. Why isn't this working? It's because you didn't actually tailor the approach for what you're trying to accomplish. So I think the ability to actually be open to seeing that the transformation of what that model is outside of your walls and into your walls is really important. And yes, of course, creativity is a huge part of that. But I don't think creativity is a new skill for people in our industry. I think we have it, and I just think we don't think we have it.
I like how you say controversial. Creativity may not have. So yeah, well, I think it's a traditional mindset, isn't it? We sort of spoke on this earlier, where archaic model. Look at the legal industry as a whole. Yes, we have moved a lot in terms of the innovation hubs and being able to then nurture and develop and collaborate. But it's the mindset of the lawyer, trained, coming in, doing one way, not the other. So, creativity, absolutely. I think, generally you dot the I's, cross the T's and get trained to do one thing. Could it be something they bring in, for education, in that side, maybe the advanced?
Yeah, definitely. And we're seeing that now, there's a lot of law firms that have roles, change maker roles and things like that, who go out and they do design thinking workshops. They teach people how do you unlock the creativity. I guess there's creativity there. I think there's probably creativity in most people, but how do you unlock it and allow and teach that person and untrain that person from thinking in the lawyerly only way into the here are the opportunities, here are the possibilities, here are the myriad of ways I can also solve this problem. And I think that's really important, definitely. And I think that's that's certainly part of the Asterisk Advance agenda is how do you bring back into the firm the ways that we're doing things.
Have you found that a challenge?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And from the start, you've got lawyers who've got their day jobs. They're 100% busy. So to get a little bit of their time is really difficult. What we've started doing actually is we have a whole raft of through the Asterisk Academy training programs for people at certain points in their career. And what we've been doing is injecting some of that type of training in those particular modules and programs, so that we can start to emphasize the importance of thinking differently and being a bit more creative and applying a different way of viewing your problems, so that we start to ingrain that a bit earlier with people, so that as they go through the ranks, that gets reinforced and reinforced. And even actually, I've been participating in a partner leadership program that actually includes that as well. So it's not as though at some point you've learned it. It's a continuous learning.
I like that. It's like da-da today, creativity. No, so more, it's really interesting, and I'm really pleased to hear that. And I think many others will sort of be looking at that potentially themselves, nurturing, isn't it? Talent, and also with the leadership programs. So looking at, just going back a little bit sort of onto the next generation of legal professionals entering this market, because right now, quite an uncertain market, I'd have to say, for many, compared to, I think the last time was the last economic crash. That's where the big uncertainty was. So what are your predictions for the future operating models of law firms? And I'll lead into the second part of that question shortly, but what's your kind of prediction when it comes to this?
Well, I think, I was going to say clearly, not necessarily clearly, but certainly I think this idea of a distributed workforce is something that all firms are looking at. How do they maintain this to a certain extent? I think human-to-human contact for the time being, human-to-human interaction, there's almost nothing that beats it yet for the time being. We really need holographic technology to get there. But I think the ability to allow teams to be much more distributed and to recognize how functional they can be, and how powerful distributed teams can be. So I think that's one of the models that's probably here to stay for quite, for the future. And so, that brings, of course, its own challenges. I think also, we're clearly seeing law firms move into adjacency. So not just legal advice, not just transactional services, but I guess moving into what may have been is more readily associated with the type of work that maybe a consulting type of company firm does, which is the implementation. So not just giving you the advice and telling you the law says you need to do this, and here's your list of what you need to do, off you go, but actually saying, and we're going to help you do that in a meaningful way, not just a check-in, have you done tasks 1 through 5 on my checklist for you, but actually maybe meaningfully being able to provide different types of resource that can work with that organization to make sure those change implementation programs are actually happening and are being done thoughtfully and in compliance with the law, but in a way that works for that organization. So I think we're going to continue to see bolts-on of additional adjacencies like that, taking my area in particular, for example, that may be moving a bit more into kind of legal operations, technology consulting types of services, which we have seen some law firms do already, where, and we're getting asked lots of questions from our clients, which are, oh, what technology are you using? What are you seeing? What do you recommend? We're looking to do this. And because we're using those technologies in very similar ways, we're a great person to provide some of that advice and maybe make some of our technology available to them, maybe adapt some of their technology to work in a way that we know works for their types of matters or cases.
And do you believe that the sector's done enough to prioritize talent? So if we're looking at, obviously, new operating models, that means talent, doesn't it? And that also means recruitment, retention, for the future of being able to develop this, and also take into consideration, you've got people like Deloitte, coming in sort of sideways and, now bringing in some of the heads of the legal service providers, Emily, that was a big one. So yeah. Do you think they're doing enough to prioritize this at the moment? Again, I think the fair answer is to say probably not enough. I think firms have recognized the challenge that's out there. I don't necessarily expect that firms fully understand how to meet that challenge yet, because frankly,
there's roles out there that are being created every day,
Yeah.
that they need to anticipate those roles existing and the skill sets that they need from that perspective, and who they need to be looking at in terms of a talent pool and looking away from the pure traditional talent pool. On the other hand, there in some areas there's been actually, I think some of the work law firms have done is relatively mature. So for example, there are a lot of law firms that have kind of alternative resourcing models that are quite mature, or they've partnered with the Axioms of the world for those types of things. So to some extent, I think there's aspects where it's come very naturally and easily, and the answer presented itself and was quite clear. I think in the areas where the operating model is genuinely new and requires different skills, I think probably law firms are still grappling with understanding exactly what they need to do first in order to rise to that challenge.
No, I'd agree. I mean, but looking at you personally, sort of, you know, because obviously you've had quite a really interesting background. One again, which I find is, as I said, it's the kind of ideal, the kind of position, as I said, for many people coming in. You know, this multi-skilled background, and now coming into where you are at Advanced and Big Law. What lessons have you personally learned? And I was going to say 6 months, but I'm going to go back 12 months, sort of have a look at that, because I think, you know, 12 months, you have a normal, you've then had the breakup, you know, of that, you know, with things which are completely out of all of everyone's controls. And then pressure internally from, you know, business, as well as, you know, I think life. What lessons have you learned?
Yeah, I think quite a few, to be completely honest, especially when I take the past 12 months, which has basically been, you know, almost the life cycle of Asher's Advanced Digital and my role, my new role as head of that. I think one of the first ones is to trust my instincts. You know, where I've been wary sometimes and held back a bit, and said, okay, well, let me just see how this goes. I'm not quite sure, but I don't want to be a naysayer in the room. To be completely honest, a lot of those times my instinct was right. And that leads me to my second lesson, which is be a bit braver. You know, be willing to be a slightly stronger contrarian voice in the room sometimes, not all the time. You know, for me personally, I'm naturally a person that likes to absorb the information and think on it a bit, usually before I have an immediate reaction. So I'm not that person that starts, you know, throwing things out necessarily in every meeting. But I think when I'm sitting in the room and I'm hearing things and I'm feeling confused or I'm feeling like this isn't the right way, rather than necessarily taking that away and stewing on it a little bit more, to be like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I don't think that was the right thing, to actually, you know, just throw out some questions so that I'm, you know, that my voice is being heard a bit earlier in the process, so that also, I don't want to people to feel as though I'm suddenly derailing. It's like, well, we sat in that meeting, you didn't say anything to me, and then, you know, a week later, suddenly you didn't want to do what we discussed. So sometimes you do just need to be a little bit braver and speak up. And then I think maybe the third big thing has actually been to recognize all of this as learning opportunities, and that sometimes those, you know, I won't call them failures, but there's small bumps that you come in the road that you come across, and maybe something didn't work out, or an opportunity didn't pan out in the way you were and you were really excited about it. Actually recognizing that you need to take all the learnings from that, and that necessarily requires a lot of self-reflection, not to beat yourself up, but to say, all right, well, as I said, you know, fail small, fail safe, fail quickly. Let me pick myself up, figure out what happened here, what's the takeaway, what do I know I need to do next time, and then just move on to the next.
So before we sort of have a look at the future and the be brave part, you know, as well, which I think sort of links to that, someone's put through a question looking a bit about, again, skill. This relates to this skill set, I think, of the future. They've said, do you know if law schools are embracing these ideas of new normal being discussed and preparing the young people for the future?
That is a good question. To be honest, I don't know what's happening in law schools. You know, I'm aware that and I've heard, because I do attend various sort of school and recruitment events, my understanding has been that law schools across the board in general have not really had a strong enough level of sort of practical knowledge imparted upon students, and in particular from a technology perspective, and what are those other pathways into the industry that aren't pure law, and legal advisors. I think that I suspect right now, well, given the times, that it'll be a hot topic of conversation, but probably one more of just questions, because I think the law firms and the entry level, businesses that are accepting people from law schools are still trying to understand themselves. What is the future normal, and how do we make sure that we're getting the right talents in these times, especially in these times? And I think that hopefully then that'll eventually trickle down to the law schools. But I would suspect that the law schools probably haven't quite figured out how to incorporate that conversation into their curriculum yet.
Yeah, I think looking at that question, by the way, thank you whoever asked that, because it was anonymous. Sorry, Tara, I couldn't give you a name there, but you have a look at DWF, sorry, not F, F in Manchester University. So collaboration sort of going on there, I think, and I think this is where maybe the law firms need to take more initiative in doing, as you talk about, collaborating further and helping this evolution of the curriculum.
Yeah, that's totally agree. And I think that's, so I wasn't educated in law in the UK, so I find the system here very interesting, because it's very different from the US system. But I think that's probably a universal problem for legal education programs, which is that practicality and the understanding of, what does it mean when I join your firm or your business, and what am I actually doing, and what are the skill sets that are actually going to get me ahead and put me in good stead? I think that's really difficult to parse out when you're just going through and learning your lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. So if any the firms listening in, do more collaboration, I think is the key, but it's time, and I get that, and ultimately it's lawyers' time means money. But I think this is where, the change piece is going to happen for the future. So looking at that, Rachel Barnes, asked a fantastic question last week to the panel. Gosh, I'm wishing my life away already. What do you see in your crystal ball for the future of the legal profession? So big question. What do you see from your perspective, from maybe Asha's advanced perspective?
Yeah.
What's your crystal ball?
From a completely personal perspective, and I really want to underline the fact that this is a personal view, because I can tend to have some slightly more controversial views on the profession overall. I think, I think law firms, as they exist today, will, and I think, and I think and I hope they will be very different in about 10 years. And I don't entirely know what they're going to look like. We've seen a lot of corporatization happening within the industry. DWF is a great example, went public. And I think the operating models that we've been using, they're much more, they're borrowed from corporates, and they're getting tailored for our industry. So I think we're going to see a real evolution of the model and what it means to be a law firm and what is considered a law firm in 10 years. I think, because a lot of my interest is in the technology side, I think that law firms could become very aligned to what we've seen happening in the financial services and fintech industry, where plug and play solutions are much more prevalent. And so this idea of open banking, where if you're with one provider, you should be able to seamlessly switch to other providers, or plug and play different providers to get a comprehensive view or solution. I think, and actually I would love it if this happened, I think our legal services customers will start to think a bit more in that way, because firstly, a lot of them are in that industry or in other industries that are getting disruptive in similar ways, where they continue to be much more discerning clients and purchasers of our services. And I think they're going to want the best of the best plugged together and fit together to meet their needs. And from a technology perspective, I'm definitely not a proponent of that let's be the one platform to rule them all type of approach, because I think that's just going to dilute the value of your entire platform. Find the things that you do really well and then collaborate with the other people that do the other things that you want to do really well. So I think that could be a really interesting shift in the industry if we move to that slightly more plug and play model, where ultimately what that means is we're going to see client-driven collaboration. And we're seeing it already. We've participated in something for Barclays with 7 other panel members where we did a collaboration around a batch of legal problem statements from them, where we designed some potential solutions, which is really fun and exciting. And actually, as I said, it was fun and exciting, and it was really nice to work with the other law firms. I think too often we think of ourselves as competitors rather than potential collaborators. And I think we will hopefully see a lot more collaboration, whether it's forced or not, as between law firms.
Well, I have to admit, you have sort of led the charge on that. So the co-opetition piece, as well, you have a look at what has been taking place on that side. And I think, I completely agree. I think it's an interesting one. It would be quite, for me, it does sort of light a bit of fire thinking plug and play legal services, because at the moment, that thought would probably horrify quite a few firms.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I'm sure. I mentioned that once in sort of a closed roundtable, and someone from another law firm just patted me on the shoulder and told me that she's like, your partners must fear you. But I think it's not. I don't think it's a fanciful idea, and it's not. The idea is not that we're fully commoditized and interchangeable, but I think it's that clients will know, oh, law firm X has this amazing platform for my e-discovery maybe, but actually law firm Y gives me the best advice, and I really like their advice. How do I get them to work together? Because I want this platform, and I don't want to spend the time convincing law firm Y to buy this platform or whatever. Why not just shove them together and say, I want the best of both worlds? And that's what clients want ultimately. They just want the best offering possible. And I think in particular, as we start to have slightly more solutionized and productized offerings, the ability for clients to say, okay, well, I want this with this, and, and pick from a smorgasbord, I think their ability is going to grow in terms of how we're evolving as firms. And so it's not to say that it devalues in any way the value that law firms bring or the need for us to have, a wide range of offerings, but I think it reinforces the need for us to have the absolute best offering wherever we're operating.
I think that's exactly the great idea. It ultimately puts the client right in the center, doesn't it?
Yeah,
where
exactly.
Ultimately, isn't it all about delivering good quality, efficient client services? But yes, firms are quite precious. I have to admit. No, I get it. I you understand. You do understand. But there is another question we have from someone anonymous again. So hello, anonymous. What do you think the resistance to these changes will come from? So where do you think, the resistance of these changes will come from? Older partners, clients, the bar organisations? That's interesting. Bar, yes. Quite even further behind than where law firms were with change. So, what's your thoughts on that, Tara?
I was going to say, I think it'll come from within the organization, because I think clients are proponents of change and the change of our business models overwhelmingly, and I think we'll be the drivers for the change. I wouldn't say older partners, because actually we've got a lot of very senior partners at Ashurst who love technology and are really interested in what we're doing. So I wouldn't, I would say there are still, of course, people in partnerships across the industry who just have that indoctrinated view of what a lawyer is, what a partner is, what a law firm is. And it's hard to get them off that view. And there's just going to be some people that we don't get off that view. So I think the change is where it's a genuine shift in the model, frankly, away from the pyramid partnership model. I think that's going to be the absolute hardest hurdle to overcome internally and culturally within an organization. But otherwise, I think the other less controversial changes that I talked about, I think for the most part, I don't see why there should be significant resistance. And I think the key is that as I said, there needs to be the clear plan, there needs to be the right support, there needs to be the milestones and markers and the measurements, of the ROI of the investment in that initiative. And I think if you can lay that out and have that be data-based, have that be experience-based plan, then I don't see any reason why someone should push back, because it's not, as long as it's not, oh, let's try this, let's completely change tomorrow, which is never going to be that. I think we need to be preparing ourselves and implementing these plans in different ways. And I think as long as it's, it's well articulated and it's based in reality, and we're going to put the money behind it, then I think the people who might have resisted will realize the success. But what you have to do is demonstrate the success of it. And if it's not successful, own up to it. Say that wasn't successful. And again, we take our learnings from that and we try the next initiative.
No, thank you. And thank you for that question. That was a really interesting one. I think ultimately it should come, I agree, within the organizations. And actually, looking internally myself, I have some more, experienced individuals and younger ones as well. And I think ultimately it's about the embracement. It's a mindset, isn't it?
Yeah,
ultimately. Absolutely. And I think that's where it's going to drive. So I'm aware we're already sort of reached our hour, and by the look at it, we can keep continuing, which is brilliant. I like these kind of conversations. But what's your kind of last thoughts? What do you kind of want to sort of say to people on the future normal, Tara, while we wrap up this session?
Yeah,
and thank you.
I think my last thought is actually, I think, the future normal is hopeful, and I think it's exciting. And I think there's a lot for all the participants in this industry and this ecosystem. There's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of progress to be made. And I think with an open mind and with the ability to hopefully change mindsets, I think, as I said at the start, I think it's an exciting time to be in this industry. And I think, we need to be maybe a bit better at celebrating everyone's successes. Every advancement made by whomever, law firm X, consulting company Y, is good for the industry because it's pushing us forward.
No, thank you, Tara, and thank you everyone for joining us. And it's been a pleasure looking at the future normal. And ultimately, I agree, it's an exciting time. One which has thrown so many challenges at us, I think, as an industry, but also really shown the resilience too. But also the great work which firms have been doing, like Ashless Advanced, but also some of the innovation from the suppliers. So more collaboration, I think. As you say, prioritizing the clients, putting the centerpiece. And I've just had here, wow, fantastic session. Thank you both, and lovely to hear from you, Tara, from Eileen. So well done. So thank you so much for the great comments. And if you want to share anything with Tara or anything, let us know, and we'll be happy to pass it on. But Tara, thank you very much. It's been wonderful. It's been fun.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for their comments as well. Yeah.
No, and thank you everyone for listening. So I look forward to you joining us for our next one. So we're going a bit more future, GPT-3, which will be quite exciting. So if you might bring you in for another session of innovation there. But thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll speak with you all again.